Hi everybody. I was going to make some ceviche, which I make quite often, but decided I could make a little video of it so that people could see how I make it in case anyone's interested in making some for themselves. First things first, you're going to need some lime juice. I use this bottled stuff from H-E-B. I've used one called Real Lime, did not care for that. It had kind of a bitter taste, but this one works fine. And of course, squeezing your own limes is also an option. One thing I learned about that though is don't squeeze them super hard because you actually will squeeze out some kind of bitter oils or something from the peel, and that can give a little bit of that bitter taste too. But again, this stuff works just fine. You're also going to need red onion. I cheated and got one already chopped up from H-E-B. I've also got some white onion and some celery here already chopped. Celery is another vegetable I like to add to my ceviche, and white onion is fine as well. I just prefer red because of the color that it adds. And then you're going to want at least one hot pepper. I use a habanero. Now these are pretty potent, so you're going to want to cut it into really small chunks. And you might want to take some time to get the pulp and the seeds out, because those are what's going to really bring the heat. But you definitely want a hot pepper in your ceviche. It's part of that whole magic that happens with the flavors and stuff. I also add just a tiny bit of minced ginger. Keep the amount of this small because it can kind of overpower, but just a little touch. And I don't always add this, but it kind of brightens it a little bit for my taste, and the times I've added it, definitely didn't regret it. Another thing I like to add to my ceviche is some capers. You know, kind of according to taste, but they add a nice little briny flavor to the bite, right? And I occasionally, not always, but I occasionally add some sliced olives also to my ceviche. If I'm taking it to somewhere where I want to share it with people, I probably won't put olives in it, or I want people to try it, I won't put olives in it. But when I make it for myself, I sometimes add some sliced olives, and it's just yet another dimension of flavor in this super flavorful dish. Probably the biggest task that you have to do here to make ceviche, and that's preparing some fish. So what I've got here is a fillet from the redfish that I routinely catch, right? So probably most of you know that I'm a fishing guide on the weekends and an avid angler, and I catch redfish regularly out of either Calaveras or Braunig lakes here in San Antonio, Texas. So I've got what we call a redfish on the half shell fillet here, and I'm just going to start taking off. You want just the white meat. There's going to be some red or darker meat in this fillet that I'm also going to purposefully avoid getting into my ceviche. That red meat has the really strong fishy flavor, whereas the white meat does not. Now some of that red meat is close to the skin. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this fillet from the skin with a nice sharp fillet knife. But I'm not going to go real close to the skin. I'm going to lift the knife up just a little bit, try to leave some of that red meat behind on that skin. So you're going to see some meat left behind on the skin here. And I've got a couple bones here to cut through. So you can already see some of that dark meat that I'm talking about there that I left behind. And as I turn the fillet over, you can see a strip of that dark red meat down through there. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out that red line, and that'll cut down quite a bit on the amount of trimming that I have to do, but I'll still need to do a little bit. You can see there's still some dark meat here by the tail and whatnot. But we'll start up here on what's kind of the shoulder of the fish, and I've got some rib bones in there too. We'll cut around those. But I'm just going to start chunking up this red fish into just little chunks, and it doesn't have to be any, all uniform size really, but you want them somewhat small, maybe the size of, I don't know, like a pencil eraser or two. make sure that you're getting that white meat, right? So keep an eye on your chunks, keep an eye on where you're cutting them from. If you get a touch of that red meat, it's not like it's gonna ruin the dish. But if you get too much of it in there, you definitely will notice that some bites of your ceviche will be very fishy. And I'm putting it into a glass bowl. You probably could also use a plastic bowl, but what I've always been told is don't use a metal bowl, probably because you're gonna put all that lime juice in there and the acid maybe would react with the bowl. I don't know. I never tried it to find out, but I always use a glass bowl. And one fillet of one of these redfish will make a pretty good amount of ceviche, because you're gonna add quite a bit of vegetables to this as well. And then you eat it on crackers, and it's like a snack or a hors d'oeuvre or a side dish. You don't eat like ceviche as a meal, so you don't need like a whole meal's worth. This bowl is typical amount I'll make to take, if I'm going to a party or something, and I might make only about half of this amount just for me and my wife. Another rule of thumb here at my house, gotta listen to salsa music while you're making ceviche. I learned to enjoy ceviche in Central and South America, so it just kind of goes together, right? So again, I'm still hacking at this piece of fish. This chunk's got a lot of that dark meat, so I'm just gonna discard that piece. And again, you can use meat from any part of the fish that's white. So I got a bit of rib cage here and got a couple little chunks of meat to add to the ceviche from that. But in a minute here, I'm gonna be pulling out another fillet, because I'm making just a little bit bigger batch today for demonstration purposes. Bigger one this time, so I probably won't use all of it, right? Matter of fact, because a lot of that dark meat is towards the tail, I'll probably just, here's what I'll do. Cut around this rib cage and get this nice shoulder meat, which I know is predominantly white meat, off of here. Again, leaving a majority of that red meat close to the skin there. So there's a little bit of that red meat there too. I can just shave this piece off. Looks pretty free of dark meat there, so speed up the process a little bit. Getting a little bit more in the bowl here. Getting almost to the point where we can put the lime juice on there. You let that marinate in the lime juice while we're chopping the vegetables. And what happens in ceviche, this is raw fish, but the acid that is in that lime juice will cook the fish. Just like you can burn your hand with fire, or you can burn it with acid, and you end up with a burn either way. Believe it or not, the acid in the lime juice will cook the fish. It'll turn it white and firm and have the texture and flavor of a cooked fish, but with heavy lime juice flavor too, and all the other flavors. No heat is applied in this dish. Everything's cold. If I didn't mention that, you can do this with a very fresh fillet. The fillet doesn't have to be cold, but you don't heat or cook anything, is what I want to get at there. And the dish is served and eaten cold. Like a salad. It's like a salad, really. As a matter of fact, like a salad, it really shines and is at its best the day you make it. As the ceviche sits, the flavors blend together more, and that may sound like a good thing, and it's still good, don't get me wrong here. But just like when a salad sits too long in its dressing and maybe gets kind of soggy, it loses something. Same thing kind of happens to ceviche. I find that right after you mix the ingredients, that's the best bite. I wouldn't keep it around for more than 2 or 3 days in the fridge, but that's never been a problem around here. It gets eaten up. So now I've got enough fish here to make a batch of ceviche. So I'm going to switch cutting boards here and go to one that I didn't use to cut up fish. We're going to cover this fish we just chopped with some lime juice. So this is a fresh bottle, just bought it today. You're literally just going to pour that lime juice in there, enough to make sure all your fish is going to get wet with that lime juice. Just give that a quick stir to make sure all that fish gets some lime juice on it. So as you can see like that, it's all wet there, and believe it or not, it's already, some of it's starting to turn color just that quick after hitting that lime juice. Let's work on our habanero pepper here. I'm just going to cut thin strips of this stuff and chop those little thin strips up into even smaller pieces. And don't rub your eyes after handling a habanero pepper. Ask me how I know. Anything you rub with your fingers, you'll feel that heat. I wish I had those fancy chef knife skills that I see on TV. I do not, but I'm pretty handy with a fillet knife. Clean lots of fish, so I tend to use a fillet knife to chop my vegetables and meat in the house too. Not the same one I used to clean fish at the lake, but I've got a collection of them. So, and you can use, if you don't like habanero, you could use a jalapeno pepper, you could use a serrano pepper, probably even some of the other peppers that are out there, but I've never tried them. But for me, habanero gives me that most authentic Panamanian flavor that I'm looking for. So we're just going to scoop that on into the mix here. And just stir that in. I'm going to start adding that layer of flavor there. And I don't know if it's really going to pick it up on camera, but that fish is losing some of the pinkness and turning whiter just in the time we've been making this video. And it'll actually be ready to eat within the next half hour. It'll be cooked enough and safe to eat. As I said, I cheated and bought already chopped up vegetables from H-E-B. They just make it too easy, man. They're already diced up. And this is both celery and onions. So I'm just going to go ahead and dump that whole tub in there. You're just going to stir that in. The celery gives it a little crunch. Again, the basics for a Panamanian style ceviche, which is what this is based on, is the onions, the pepper, the lime juice, and the fish. Celery, capers, ginger, olives, some of these other things that I add a touch of in here, those are all optional. But the basics, you got to have the onions, you got to have the pepper, you got to have the fish, you got to have the lime juice. You can add a little more lime juice now because it's gotten a little deeper in there with the addition of the onions. And just for color, I'm going to add some red onions too. You may be saying, man, that's a lot of onions, and it is. But onions are a very key component of this dish. And I won't tell you it doesn't taste oniony, but onion is not you don't just get a big onion flavor in your mouth. You get so many other flavors in there too, but it has a lot of onions in it. A little more lime juice here, just make sure we got enough to keep working on that fish. Starting to look good, starting to get those colors. So this is what I'm going to add. Just a touch of the ginger, just that much, just a little touch in there. And I find that I don't know, it adds a little something that just kind of brightens it. Definitely not mandatory. You may see it in some ceviche recipes and you won't see it in others because it's definitely an optional thing. And capers. I honestly don't remember ever seeing a recipe calling for capers. It may have been my own invention, I don't remember. Or I may have seen it in some ceviche that I had somewhere in my travels, I don't know. But I do know that I like them in there. They add a briny little touch. So how many you add is kind of up to you. I'm gonna add about that many. stir them in there. Enough so that if you put a spoonful of this on a cracker, you get at least one in your bite. So you probably already figured out, I'm not one to measure my ingredients. I just kind of go by both past experience and instinct, and so far so good. And this also, as I said, totally optional, but I'm gonna add a few of these green olive slices in here too. They bring another kind of a briny flavor and a richness, if you will, to the ceviche. It's fine if you get a couple of those red pimento pieces in there with them, no problem. Just a few. So really, only two more things left to add, and that's sea salt and a little bit of crushed black pepper. So the celery, it adds something to the flavor, and it also adds color, and it adds crunch to the dish, right? Personally, I use sea salt, which again from HEB, and it's kind of a coarse sea salt. I don't know if you can see that, but the coarseness of your salt should help you determine how much to add, right? The more coarse it is, you can go with a little more, but if it's fine salt, you're going to want to go with less, because it's going to be more salt actually in a dose. But I pour a little bit in my hand, about like that, toss it on in there, stir it in. Ask yourself, does that need salt? If you added too much salt, you can't take it out, right? So I always go light at first. I can always add a little bit more later if I need to, but the crackers you eat it on, they have salt too, so. But don't just keep salting it without tasting it, right? That's true of most foods, I think. Then I got a little black pepper here. I'm just gonna grind up and add just a little. So this actually grinds kind of into the cap, and then you can see kind of how much you want to add there. So just add a little bit there. Just stir that in too. This ceviche is basically done, and you could eat it right now, and it will not harm you. What I'm going to do though is just add a touch more lime juice. Whoop. Because we've diluted it a little bit with all these vegetables we've added. So just a little more lime juice, just get a little more kick of that acid in there. Make sure it's stirred up real good here. And I'm gonna cap it and put it in the fridge for half an hour. But you can look through here now and see all of that fish has turned nice and white. So the lime juice has done its job. We're just gonna let it sit in the fridge another half hour just to make sure that all the pieces got cooked all the way through. So there we go.